Rebecca had everything most people dreamed of. At 41 years old, she was running a tech company that she'd built from absolutely nothing. 15 years ago, she was coding in her tiny apartment, surviving on instant noodles and hope. Now her company occupied 3 floors of a glass tower in downtown Seattle, employed over 800 people, and was worth $500 million. But here's the thing about success that nobody tells you. It doesn't feel the way you think it will. Rebecca's alarm went off at 5:30 every morning. She'd roll out of bed, check her phone before her feet hit the floor, and start responding to emails while the coffee brewed. By 6:15, she was in the shower, still mentally drafting responses to the overnight messages from the London office. Breakfast was whatever her assistant had stocked in the office kitchen. She couldn't remember the last time she'd actually cooked something. Her days blurred together. Back-to-back meetings from 8 in the morning until 6 at night. Investor calls where she had to sound confident even when she felt terrified. Strategy sessions where every decision could make or break the company. Performance reviews where she held people's livelihoods in her hands. Product launches that kept her up at night worrying about every possible thing that could go wrong. Lunch was always at her desk. Usually something from the catering service the company used. She'd eat while reading reports or preparing for the next meeting. Sometimes she'd realize at 3 in the afternoon that she'd forgotten to eat at all. Her corner office had floor-to-ceiling windows with a view that people would pay thousands for in a hotel. But Rebecca barely looked at it anymore. She'd stopped noticing the mountains in the distance, the way the light changed throughout the day, or how the city looked when it rained. People thought she had it all figured out. They saw the designer clothes, the confident presentations, the way she commanded a room. They didn't see that she hadn't taken a real day off in 4 years. They didn't know that she couldn't remember the last time she'd laughed until her stomach hurt, or that she sometimes forgot what day of the week it was because they all felt the same. Her penthouse apartment was beautiful. Minimalist furniture, an open kitchen with marble countertops and high-end appliances she'd never learned to use. The fridge contained bottled water, some takeout containers from 2 weeks ago, and a bottle of champagne from a client that she'd never opened. She slept maybe 5 hours a night. Even then, she'd wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning, her mind racing with problems to solve and decisions to make. She'd grab her phone and answer emails until she felt tired enough to try sleeping again. Her younger brother Tom called every week. He lived in Montana, working as a park ranger in one of those places that looked like something from a postcard. He'd tell her about hiking trails and wildlife and the changing seasons. She'd listen while typing on her laptop, giving him half her attention, always thinking about the next thing on her schedule. "You sound tired," he'd say. "I'm fine," she'd always reply. "Just busy. You know how it is." But Tom didn't know how it was. He'd walked away from a corporate job years ago, took a massive pay cut, and moved to the middle of nowhere. Their parents thought he was crazy. Rebecca had thought so too back then. The collapse happened on a Thursday afternoon during the quarterly earnings presentation. Rebecca was standing in front of the board, clicking through slides she'd rehearsed a dozen times. She was talking about projected growth in the Asian markets when the room started spinning. She grabbed the edge of the table, tried to keep talking, but her vision went dark around the edges, and the next thing she knew, she was on the floor with people hovering over her, their voices sounding like they were coming from underwater. The ambulance ride was embarrassing. The ER was worse. They ran tests and found nothing wrong with her heart, her brain, her blood. Everything came back normal. "You're exhausted," the doctor told her, a woman probably 10 years younger than Rebecca. "When's the last time you took a vacation?" Rebecca tried to remember. There was that conference in Miami 2 years ago, but that was for work. Before that, maybe a long weekend 5 years back. "Your body is telling you to slow down," the doctor continued. "This is a warning. Next time it might be something more serious." Rebecca nodded, already thinking about the meetings she was missing, the deals that needed her attention, the product launch next month that required her approval on 1,000 different details. They released her that evening with instructions to rest and reduce stress. She was back in the office the next morning. Her assistant looked shocked to see her. "Rebecca, you should be at home." "I'm fine," Rebecca said, settling into her chair and opening her laptop. "We have the investor meeting at 10, but she wasn't fine. She knew it. Her hands shook slightly when she typed. She felt hollow inside, like she'd been running so fast for so long that there was nothing left of her except the running itself. That's when Tom showed up. She was in her apartment that Sunday, trying to catch up on work she'd missed during the few hours in the hospital. There was a knock on her door. She opened it to find her brother standing there with a backpack and a concerned expression. "Tom, what are you doing here?" "Your assistant called me," he said, walking past her into the apartment. "Told me what happened." "I'm fine." "It was nothing. Just got a little dizzy." Tom looked around her apartment, at the empty takeout containers on the counter, at the laptop open on the couch, still glowing with spreadsheets, at the view outside her windows that she never seemed to see anymore. "When's the last time you went outside?" he asked. "I go outside every day. I walk from my car to the office. That doesn't count." He moved to her closet and pulled out a small suitcase. "Pack a bag. You're coming with me." Rebecca laughed, but it sounded hollow even to her. "Tom, I can't. We have a merger negotiation starting on Tuesday. I have 3 board meetings this week. The product team needs final approval on the new features, and they'll all still be there when you get back." He started pulling clothes from her drawers, tossing them toward the suitcase. "You almost collapsed in front of your entire board. Your body literally shut down. What happens when it does it again during an important meeting, or when you're driving?" "It won't happen again. You're right. Because you're coming with me for 1 week. 7 days. That's all I'm asking." Rebecca felt tears stinging her eyes, which shocked her. She couldn't remember the last time she'd cried. "I can't leave. The company needs me." Tom stopped packing and looked at her. Really looked at her, the way nobody had in years. "The company will survive a week without you." "Will you survive a week without the company?" That question hit her harder than she expected. She thought about her life, the endless meetings, the constant pressure, the way every day felt exactly like the one before. She thought about how she'd built this entire company, but couldn't remember the last time she felt proud of it instead of terrified of losing it. 1 week, Tom said softly. "Let me show you something. If you hate it, I'll drive you back myself." Rebecca looked at her laptop, still open, still demanding her attention. Then she looked at her brother, who'd driven however many hours to come get her. "Fine," she heard herself say. 1 week. She had no idea that the walk her brother had planned would change everything. That 7 miles through the wilderness would teach her more about life and business than a decade of board meetings. That sometimes the path forward meant going backward first, into the places we've forgotten existed. All she knew was that she was tired. So tired that even arguing felt like too much effort. So she packed her bag, turned off her laptop, and followed her brother out the door. The drive took forever, or at least that's how it felt to Rebecca, sitting in the passenger seat of Tom's beat-up truck, watching the city fade away behind them. She kept her phone in her lap, checking it every few minutes, watching the signal bar slowly disappear. "You should try looking out the window instead of at that screen," Tom said, not unkindly. "I am looking," Rebecca lied. But they both knew it wasn't true. They drove through the night, stopping once for gas and terrible coffee at a station in the middle of nowhere. Rebecca tried to use the Wi-Fi, but the connection was so slow it was practically useless. She felt a flutter of panic in her chest. What if something important happened? What if someone needed her? "They'll manage," Tom said, as if reading her mind. "They always do." She wanted to argue, but the truth was she was exhausted. The hum of the truck, the darkness outside, the way the road seemed to go on forever. It all lulled her into a state somewhere between sleep and waking. She dozed off with her phone still clutched in her hand. When she woke up, everything had changed. The sun was just starting to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange that she'd forgotten existed. Mountains surrounded them, covered in trees so thick and green they looked almost unreal. The road had narrowed to barely 2 lanes, winding through wilderness that seemed to stretch forever. "Where are we?" she asked, her voice rough from sleep. "Almost there," Tom said. He looked completely relaxed, one hand on the wheel, a slight smile on his face. This was his element. Rebecca checked her phone. No signal, 0 bars. She felt another surge of panic, followed immediately by something else. Something that might have been relief, though she wouldn't admit it. They pulled into a small dirt parking lot next to a wooden sign that read Clearwater Trail. There were no other cars. No people, just trees and sky and the sound of birds she couldn't identify. "Okay," Tom said, turning off the engine. "Time to walk." Rebecca looked around. "Where's your cabin?" "About 7 miles that way." He pointed into the forest where she could see the beginning of a narrow trail disappearing into the trees. 7 miles? Rebecca stared at him. Tom, I thought we were driving to your cabin. We are. Well, we were. Now we're walking to it. He got out of the truck and grabbed 2 backpacks from the bed. I can't walk 7 miles. I haven't hiked since college. Then you're overdue. He handed her one of the packs. Come on, we're burning daylight, Rebecca wanted to refuse. Wanted to demand he drive her back to civilization. But something in his calm certainty made her take the backpack. It was heavier than she expected. What's in here? Food, water, some basic supplies. Don't worry, I packed light. She shouldered the pack awkwardly, adjusting the straps while Tom locked the truck. Her sneakers, designer ones she'd bought for the gym she never went to, looked ridiculous next to his worn hiking boots. Ready? He asked. No, she thought. But she nodded anyway. The trail started easy enough. Flat wide, shaded by tall trees. Rebecca walked behind Tom, focusing on not tripping over roots or rocks. Within 10 minutes, she was breathing hard. Within 20, her legs were burning. Can we stop? She gasped. Tom paused, turning back to look at her. Sure, as often as you need. They stood there while Rebecca caught her breath. She wanted to complain, to point out how ridiculous this was, but she was too winded to waste energy on words. You okay? Tom asked. Fine, she lied. They started again. Stop, walk, stop, walk. Rebecca lost count of how many times they paused. Each time, Tom waited patiently, never rushing her, never making her feel bad about her pace. He'd point out things while they rested. A hawk circling overhead, the way moss grew on the north side of the trees, the sound of a creek somewhere in the distance. Rebecca barely registered any of it. She was too focused on her burning legs, her aching shoulders, and the growing awareness that she was completely out of shape despite the expensive gym membership she paid for every month. By the time they reached the 1-mile marker, a small wooden post beside the trail, Rebecca was seriously considering turning back. But when she looked behind them, the trailhead had disappeared from view. They were surrounded by forest in every direction. How much farther? She asked. 6 more miles, Tom said cheerfully. Rebecca wanted to cry, or scream, or both. But something strange was happening. As they walked, as her body found a rhythm despite the discomfort, as her breath matched her steps, something in her mind started to shift. The constant loop of worries and to-do lists that usually played nonstop in her head began to quiet. Not completely. Not at first. But little by little, the urgent feeling that she needed to be checking her email, calling her assistant, reviewing that report, it started to fade into the background. Maybe it was because she literally couldn't do any of those things out here. Maybe it was because walking took enough focus that there wasn't room for anything else. Or maybe it was just that her body was so busy complaining that her mind didn't have energy for its usual anxiety. Whatever it was, by mile 2, Rebecca noticed something she hadn't noticed in years. The world around her, the trees weren't just green. They were 100 different shades of green, from the pale new leaves to the deep forest color of the oldest pines. The air smelled different here, like earth and pine needles and something clean that she couldn't name. The light came through the canopy in shafts, making patterns on the forest floor. You doing okay? Tom asked, glancing back at her. Yeah, Rebecca said, surprised to find it was mostly true. Her legs still hurt, but it was a different kind of hurt. The kind that came from actually using your body instead of just sitting at a desk all day. They stopped for water at mile 3. Rebecca collapsed onto a fallen log, gulping from the bottle Tom handed her. Her shirt was soaked with sweat. Her hair, usually perfectly styled, was a mess. She probably looked terrible. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she didn't care. You know, Tom said, sitting beside her. When I first started working in the park, I could barely make it up the easy trails. I was so out of shape from my office job. Thought I was going to die that first week. Really? Rebecca couldn't imagine it. Tom looked like he'd been hiking his whole life. Really. But you know what I learned? Your body adjusts. You get stronger. And more importantly, your mind adjusts too. What do you mean? Tom was quiet for a moment, looking out at the forest. In the city, everything's about speed. Fast food, fast internet, fast responses. Everything's urgent. But out here, nothing's fast. Trees take years to grow. Seasons change gradually. Animals move at their own pace. And you realize that maybe the rest of the world doesn't need to move at internet speed either. Rebecca thought about her office. The constant pressure to move faster, grow faster, respond faster. The way every email felt urgent, every decision felt critical. Every moment felt like it could be the difference between success and failure. But if you slow down in business, you fall behind, she said. Do you, though? Tom stood, shouldering his pack again. Or do you just think you will because everyone else is rushing around pretending they have it all figured out? They started walking again before Rebecca could answer, which was fine because she didn't have an answer. Mile 4 was harder. The trail started going uphill, and Rebecca's legs were already tired. She fell into a pattern. 10 steps, breathe. 10 more steps, breathe. Don't think about how far they still had to go. Just focus on the next 10 steps. It was, she realized, kind of like building a company. You couldn't think about everything at once or you'd freeze up. You just had to focus on the next step, then the next, then the next. But somewhere along the way, she'd forgotten that. She'd started trying to think about everything at once. Every problem, every opportunity, every risk. No wonder she'd collapsed. Hey, Tom called from ahead. Come look at this. Rebecca caught up to find him crouched beside the trail, pointing at something in the dirt. Tracks. Small ones with distinct pad marks. Fox, he said. Probably passed through early this morning. Rebecca stared at the tracks. When was the last time she'd noticed something like this? Something small and easy to miss if you weren't paying attention? There's a whole world happening right under our noses, Tom said, standing up. Most people never see it because they're moving too fast or looking at their phones. The comment stung because it was true. How much had she missed in the last few years? How many moments, how many small, beautiful things because she was always somewhere else in her head? They walked on. Mile 5, mile 6. The trail got steeper and Rebecca's legs shook with every step, but she kept going. Her mind was surprisingly clear now. The endless chatter had quieted to almost nothing. There was just the trail, the trees, the rhythm of walking. Almost there, Tom said as they crested a hill. And there, through the trees, Rebecca could see it. A small cabin beside a crystal-clear lake, surrounded by mountains that seemed to touch the sky. It was the most beautiful thing she'd seen in years. She'd made it. 7 miles. She'd actually done it. Rebecca dropped her backpack on the cabin's porch and just stood there staring. The lake stretched out in front of them, so still it looked like glass. The mountains reflected perfectly in the water, creating a mirror image that made it hard to tell where the real world ended and the reflection began. Come on, Tom said, unlocking the cabin door. Let's get you some food and rest. The cabin was small but cozy. One main room with a wood stove, a simple kitchen area, a table with 2 chairs and a couch that had seen better days. A ladder led to a loft where Rebecca could see a couple of beds. There was no TV, no Wi-Fi router, nothing electronic except a battery-powered radio on a shelf. Rebecca's first instinct was to check her phone. Still no signal. She felt that familiar panic rising again. Hey, Tom said gently, put the phone down. It'll still be there tomorrow. She set it on the table but kept glancing at it while Tom made sandwiches. Simple ones. Just bread, cheese, and some vegetables he'd brought. But when Rebecca bit into hers, she couldn't believe how good it tasted. Maybe it was the hunger from the hike, or maybe food just tasted better when you were actually paying attention to it. After eating, Tom suggested she rest while he gathered firewood for the evening. Rebecca lay down on the couch, intending to just close her eyes for a minute. She woke up 3 hours later, disoriented and groggy. The light had changed. It was late afternoon now, and golden sunlight streamed through the windows. Tom was sitting on the porch, and Rebecca could hear the quiet creak of a rocking chair. She grabbed her phone before going outside. Still no signal. She felt a spike of anxiety. 3 hours offline. Anything could have happened, but there was nothing she could do about it out here. Tom looked up when she stepped onto the porch. Feel better? Yeah, Rebecca admitted. She did feel better. Tired, sore, but somehow more rested than she'd felt in months. Want to take a walk? Tom asked. Rebecca stared at him. We just walked 7 miles. Not a long one. Just down to the lake. I want to show you something. Her legs protested, but Rebecca followed him down a narrow path to the water's edge. The lake was even more beautiful up close. So clear she could see rocks on the bottom, even 20 feet from shore. Tom picked up a flat stone and skipped it across the water. 1, 2, 3, 4 skips before it sank. When's the last time you skipped a stone? He asked, handing her one. Rebecca tried to remember. She was probably 12. She threw the stone, but it just kerplunked straight down. Here, Tom said, demonstrating the motion. It's all in the wrist. You're not throwing it at the water, you're throwing it across it. She tried again. This time the stone skipped once before sinking. Then twice. By her fifth try, she managed 3 skips and actually laughed out loud. A real laugh, not the polite professional one she used in meetings, see? Tom said. You've just been out of practice. They sat on a large rock by the water. Tom pointed across the lake. See those trees? The ones with the white bark? Those are birch, and those darker ones beside them are spruce. Each tree has a different purpose in the forest. Some grow fast and provide shade for slower growing species. Some have deep roots that prevent erosion. Some provide food for wildlife. Rebecca nodded, only half listening at first. Companies are like forests, Tom continued. Everyone thinks you need every tree to be a redwood. Big, fast-growing, impressive. But a forest full of only redwoods wouldn't survive. You need diversity. Different strengths. Different purposes. Now he had her attention. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe you're trying to make every part of your company move at the same pace. But different teams need different things. Some need time to grow slowly. Some need quick wins. Some need to build deep foundations before they can show results. Rebecca thought about her quarterly reviews, where she pushed every department to show constant growth, where steady wasn't good enough, where anything less than rapid expansion felt like failure. But investors want growth, she said. Investors want sustainability, Tom countered. Real growth, not the fake kind that burns out in a year. Look at this lake. It's been here for thousands of years because the ecosystem is balanced. Nothing's trying to grow faster than it should. They sat in silence for a while, watching the sun get lower. A fish jumped, creating ripples that spread across the still water. You know what I love about this place? Tom said. Everything happens in its own time. The sun rises and sets. The seasons change. Animals hunt and eat and sleep. None of them are worried about being more efficient or optimizing their process. They just do what they're meant to do. Humans aren't fish, Rebecca said. No, but we're still part of nature. We still need rest and rhythm and time. We've just convinced ourselves we're above all that. A bird called from somewhere in the trees. A long, complex song that echoed across the water. What kind of bird is that? Rebecca asked. Hermit thrush. They've got one of the most beautiful songs of any bird in North America. Tom stood and stretched. Come on. I'll teach you to identify some of the common birds around here. For the next hour, Tom taught her to listen. Really listen. Not just hear sounds, but distinguish between them. The difference between a raven's croak and a crow's caw. The chip-chip-chip of a chipmunk versus the chirp of a bird. The rustle of wind in pine trees versus aspens. Most people walk through the forest deaf, Tom said. They're so busy thinking about other things that they miss an entire layer of communication happening all around them. Rebecca thought about her meetings. How often was she actually listening versus just waiting for her turn to talk? How many times had her team tried to tell her something important, but she'd been too distracted to hear it? They walked back to the cabin as the sun started setting. Tom built a fire in the wood stove and they made a simple dinner. Pasta with sauce from a jar, but somehow it tasted amazing. After dinner, they sat on the porch watching darkness fall. The stars began to appear, more stars than Rebecca had ever seen in her life. The city had too much light pollution for this. There's the Big Dipper, Tom said, pointing. Follow those 2 stars at the end of the cup. Straight up, and that's the North Star. He showed her constellations, told her the stories behind their names. Rebecca found herself relaxing in a way she couldn't remember ever feeling before. Like every muscle in her body was finally letting go of tension she didn't even know she'd been carrying. Can I ask you something? She said after a while. Sure. Do you ever regret leaving your law career? I mean, you were on track to make partner. You gave up a lot. Tom was quiet for a moment. I gave up money, status, the approval of people who I thought mattered. But you know what I gained? My life, my sanity, the ability to sleep at night without medication. Relationships with people who care about me, not what I can do for them. But wasn't it scary, making that change? Terrifying, Tom admitted. Everyone thought I was crazy. Mom still introduces me as her son who used to be a lawyer, like my current job is just a phase I'm going through. Rebecca laughed. Their mother definitely did that. But here's the thing, Tom continued. Being scared of change is normal. What's not normal is staying in a situation that's literally making you sick just because you're afraid of what else might happen. The words hit hard. Rebecca had collapsed in front of her entire board. Her body had shut down, and her first response had been to go right back to the same behavior that caused it. I don't know how to be any other way, she said quietly. Sure you do. You walked 7 miles today. A week ago you would have said that was impossible. That's different, is it? You were scared. You were uncomfortable. You wanted to quit, but you kept going anyway. You learned as you went. You adjusted your pace. You took breaks when you needed them. That's exactly how you change your life. A shooting star streaked across the sky, and Rebecca made a wish without even thinking about it. She couldn't remember the last time she'd done something that simple and hopeful. They sat there for another hour, not talking much, just being. Rebecca felt her mind wandering, but not in the anxious way it usually did. More like it was stretching out, exploring spaces it hadn't visited in years. She thought about her company. The people who worked for her, how many of them were burning out the same way she had been? How many were too scared to say anything because the culture she'd created valued pushing through pain? She thought about her own life outside of work. Or rather, the lack of one. When was the last time she'd done something just because she enjoyed it? When had she last talked to a friend about something other than business? When had she last felt like a person instead of a position? I think I've been living wrong, she said, surprising herself. Tom didn't act surprised. What do you mean? I thought success meant working harder than everyone else. Being available 24/7. Never showing weakness. Always having the answer. But what if that's not what actually matters? What do you think matters? Tom asked. Rebecca watched the stars, thinking about the lake, the trees, the birds they'd seen. About how everything out here seemed to know its place and purpose without trying so hard. Maybe it's about being present, she said slowly. Really being there for the important moments instead of always thinking about the next thing. Maybe it's about building something sustainable instead of just fast. Maybe it's about being human instead of trying to be a machine. That sounds like a CEO worth working for, Tom said. They sat there until the cold drove them inside. Tom showed Rebecca the loft where she'd be sleeping. The bed was simple, just a mattress and some blankets, but it looked incredibly inviting. Rebecca lay down and pulled the blankets up, expecting her mind to start racing. But instead, exhaustion pulled her under almost immediately. Her last thought before sleep took her was that she couldn't hear any of the city sounds she'd grown used to. No traffic, no sirens, no sounds of other people in nearby apartments. Just silence. And somehow it was the most comforting sound in the world. Rebecca woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of rain on the roof. For a confused moment, she had no idea where she was. Then it came back. The cabin, the hike, Tom. She climbed down from the loft, every muscle in her body screaming in protest. She was more sore than she'd ever been in her life. Tom looked up from the stove where he was making eggs. Morning. How'd you sleep? Like the dead, Rebecca admitted. What time is it? About 7. You slept almost 9 hours, 9 hours. Rebecca couldn't remember the last time she'd slept that long. Even on weekends, she was usually up by 6, checking email and getting a head start on the week. She looked out the window. Dark clouds covered the sky and rain fell in steady sheets. I guess we're stuck inside today. Actually, Tom said, plating the eggs, I thought we'd head back to the trailhead. Your week's almost up. Rebecca felt a strange mix of relief and disappointment. Part of her was desperate to get back to civilization, to her phone, to her company. But another part wasn't ready to leave this quiet, simple place. In the rain? She asked. Weather doesn't wait for convenience, Tom said with a shrug. Besides, you've never really experienced nature until you've been uncomfortable in it. They ate breakfast while the rain drummed overhead. Tom explained what they'd need to do differently in wet conditions. Watch their footing more carefully. Take more breaks. Stay aware of changes in the weather. Conditions can shift fast in the mountains, he said. What seems manageable can become dangerous quickly if you're not paying attention. An hour later, they were packed and ready. Tom handed Rebecca a rain jacket and helped her adjust her backpack. Ready? He asked. Rebecca looked out at the rain. Not really, but let's do it anyway. The first mile was miserable. Cold rain dripped down Rebecca's neck despite the jacket. Her feet squelched in her sneakers with every step. The trail had turned muddy and she had to concentrate hard to avoid slipping. Everything hurt more than yesterday. Her legs were already sore from the hike in, and now they had to carry her back. The backpack felt twice as heavy. Every step required conscious effort. You doing okay? Tom called back. Great, Rebecca lied through gritted teeth. But as they continued, something shifted again. Maybe it was because the discomfort was so constant that she stopped fighting it and just accepted it. Maybe it was because she was too focused on not falling to think about anything else. Whatever the reason, Rebecca found a strange kind of peace in the difficulty. This was real. This was immediate. There was no pretending, no performing, no projecting an image. Just one foot in front of the other, trying not to slip in the mud. By mile 2, she was soaked through. Her carefully maintained hair was plastered to her head. Her designer workout clothes were covered in mud. She probably looked ridiculous, and she didn't care. For the first time in years, she genuinely didn't care how she looked. Tom stopped near a large rock overhang. "Let's rest here for a minute. Get out of the rain." They huddled under the overhang, and Tom pulled out water and some trail mix. Rebecca's hands shook slightly as she ate. She was cold, wet, tired, and more miserable than she'd been in a long time. She was also more alive than she'd felt in years. "This is what I wanted to show you," Tom said, gesturing at the rain, the trail, their soaked clothes. "What, suffering?" Rebecca asked, but she was almost smiling. "Resilience," Tom corrected. "You're uncomfortable. You're tired. You want to quit. But you're not quitting. You're doing it anyway. I don't really have a choice, and you always have a choice. You could sit down and refuse to move. You could panic. You could make this experience worse by fighting it every step of the way." Tom took a drink of water. "But you're not doing any of that. You're just enduring, adapting, continuing." Rebecca thought about that. He was right. She'd spent the first mile complaining internally, being angry at the rain, at Tom for making her do this, at herself for agreeing to come. But somewhere along the way, she'd stopped fighting and started just dealing with it. "Business is like this sometimes," Tom continued. "Sometimes conditions are perfect. Sunny, clear path, everything going your way. But sometimes it rains. Sometimes the trail gets muddy and hard, and you can't control that. All you can control is how you respond, so just keep walking?" Rebecca asked. "Just keep walking. Adjust your pace if you need to. Take breaks, but keep moving forward." They rested for another few minutes, then stepped back into the rain. The trail got steeper here, and the mud made it treacherous. Rebecca slipped once, catching herself hard on her hands. They were scraped and muddy and would have horrified her a week ago. Now she just wiped them on her pants and kept going. Around mile 4, the rain got worse. What had been steady became a downpour. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and Rebecca felt real fear for the first time. "Tom, is this safe?" He checked the sky, calculating. "Storm's still a ways off, but we need to keep moving. No stopping until we find better shelter." They walked faster now, despite Rebecca's exhaustion. The thunder got closer. The wind picked up, whipping rain into their faces. Rebecca's heart pounded, and not just from exertion. This was actual danger. Not the pretend danger of a business deal falling through or a bad quarter. Real physical danger where a mistake could have serious consequences. "There," Tom pointed ahead. "See that cluster of trees? That's about a quarter mile. We can wait out the worst under there." Rebecca pushed herself harder than she thought possible. Her legs burned. Her lungs ached. But she kept going, kept moving, because stopping wasn't an option. They made it to the trees just as the rain became truly violent. Lightning cracked, close enough that Rebecca felt it in her chest. They huddled against the trunks, and Tom showed her how to position herself to minimize risk. "In situations like this," he said, his voice calm despite everything, "you don't panic. You assess. You adapt. You do what you can to stay safe, and you wait for conditions to improve. And if they don't improve, they always do eventually. Weather passes. Storms end. You just have to outlast them." They sat there for maybe 20 minutes, though it felt like hours. Rebecca watched the storm rage around them, feeling small and vulnerable in a way she'd never felt in a boardroom. But she also felt strangely capable. She'd made it this far. She was cold and scared, but still thinking clearly, still making decisions, still moving forward when she could and taking shelter when she needed to. Finally, the worst of the storm passed. The rain continued, but lighter. The thunder moved off into the distance. "Ready?" Tom asked. Rebecca nodded. They stepped back onto the trail. The last 3 miles were a blur of mud and rain and determination. Rebecca stopped thinking about the discomfort and just focused on each step. Left foot, right foot, breathe. Left foot, right foot, breathe. She thought about all the times she'd wanted to quit over the past 15 years. Building the company had been one crisis after another. Failed product launches, lost clients, cash flow problems, competing offers from people trying to steal her best employees. Every time she'd thought about giving up. Going back to a regular job where someone else made the decisions, where she could just do her work and go home and not carry the weight of 800 people's livelihoods on her shoulders. But she hadn't quit. Just like she wasn't quitting now. She'd kept moving forward, adjusting her approach, learning from mistakes, enduring the hard parts until conditions improved. Maybe that was the real skill, not being perfect, not having all the answers, not even being particularly brilliant. Just being able to keep going when things got hard. When they finally reached the trailhead parking lot, Rebecca was so exhausted she could barely think. But they'd made it. 7 miles in terrible conditions, and they'd made it. Tom unlocked his truck and they both climbed in, dripping water everywhere. He started the engine and cranked up the heat. "So," he said, pulling onto the road, "what did you learn?" Rebecca was quiet for a long time, watching the forest fade behind them. What had she learned? That she was stronger than she thought. That discomfort wasn't the same as disaster. That sometimes the only way forward was straight through the hard part. "I learned that I've been afraid of the wrong things," she finally said. "I've been so scared of failing, of letting people down, of losing what I've built. But I wasn't scared enough of losing myself," Tom nodded. And I think I forgot that building something good takes time. I've been so focused on speed, on growth, on always doing more. But maybe the point isn't to grow as fast as possible. Maybe it's to grow in a way that lasts." They drove in silence for a while. Rebecca's phone, which she'd left in the truck, started buzzing as they got closer to civilization. Message after message coming through as the signal returned. She looked at it, felt the familiar pull to check everything immediately. But she didn't pick it up. "Not yet. The company survived without you," Tom said, noticing her glance. "I know. Do you?" Really, Rebecca thought about that. For years, she'd believed that everything would fall apart if she wasn't there, wasn't working, wasn't constantly managing and deciding and controlling. But it hadn't. The world had kept turning. "Yeah," she said. "I do. So what are you going to do different?" That was the question, wasn't it? It was easy to have revelations in the wilderness. Easy to feel transformed when you were disconnected from all the pressures and demands. But what happened when she got back? When she walked back into that office with all its expectations and urgencies? "I don't know exactly," Rebecca admitted. "But something has to change. I can't go back to the way things were." Tom smiled. "Good. That's a start." They stopped at a diner for lunch and Rebecca caught her reflection in the bathroom mirror. She looked terrible. Mud-streaked, exhausted hair, a disaster. But her eyes looked clearer than they had in years. Like she'd woken up from a long sleep. She finally checked her phone while they ate. There were dozens of messages, but nothing was actually an emergency. Her team had handled everything. Made decisions, solved problems, done their jobs. They hadn't needed her as much as she'd thought. Or maybe they'd needed her to trust them more than they needed her to control everything. "Ready to go home?" Tom asked as they got back in the truck. Home. Rebecca thought about her sterile apartment, her demanding office, her carefully constructed life that had almost killed her. "Yeah," she said, "but I think home might need to look a little different from now on." The first morning back in her apartment felt strange. Rebecca woke up at 5:30, reached for her phone out of habit, then stopped. She lay there for a moment, listening. The city sounds that had once been background noise now seemed overwhelming. Car horns, sirens, the rumble of traffic, people shouting on the street below. She got up and made coffee. Actually made it, using the expensive machine that had been sitting unused in her kitchen. While it brewed, she opened the curtains and looked out at the view she'd stopped noticing months ago. The sun was just starting to rise, painting the sky in colors that reminded her of that first morning at Tom's cabin. Her phone buzzed. Multiple messages from her assistant, marking calendar items for the week. Board meeting Tuesday, product launch review Wednesday, 3 investor calls scheduled, everything waiting for her, just like it always had. But this time Rebecca didn't feel that familiar spike of anxiety. She felt calm, clear, ready. She arrived at the office early before most people were there. Her assistant looked shocked when Rebecca walked past her desk, carrying a real coffee cup instead of a takeout container. "Rebecca, you're back. How are you feeling?" "Different," Rebecca said. And it was the truth. She closed her office door and looked at her desk. The tower of reports and files. The multiple screens showing stock prices and analytics. The phone that never stopped ringing. This had been her entire world, and she'd almost let it destroy her. Rebecca opened her laptop and composed an email to her leadership team. Meeting this morning, 9 a.m. Everyone required. When her team filed into the conference room, they looked worried. Rebecca knew what they were thinking. She'd collapsed in front of everyone, disappeared for a week without contact, and now was calling an emergency meeting. They probably expected bad news. "Thanks for coming," Rebecca started, standing at the head of the table. "I want to talk about some changes I'm making." Everyone tensed. Changes from the CEO usually meant layoffs or restructuring. "First, I'm hiring a chief operating officer, someone to handle day-to-day operations so I can focus on long-term strategy and vision. I've been trying to do everything, and that's not sustainable. Not for me and probably not for this company." People exchanged glances. No one spoke. "Second, I'm implementing mandatory time off. And I mean mandatory. I don't want to see anyone working through lunch at their desk. I don't want people answering emails at midnight unless something is literally on fire. We've created a culture where burning out is seen as dedication, and that stops now." Her CFO cleared his throat. "Rebecca, with respect, our competitors are working around the clock. If we slow down, we're not slowing down," Rebecca interrupted. "We're being smarter. How many people have we lost in the last year to burnout? How many sick days are we paying for? How many mistakes are being made because people are too exhausted to think straight?" She pulled up some numbers she'd asked HR to compile. The turnover rate was staggering. The medical costs were enormous. And the error rate on projects increased dramatically in the fourth quarter, when everyone was most exhausted. "This isn't about being nice," Rebecca continued. "It's about being effective. A team that's rested makes better decisions. A leader who's present is more valuable than one who's available 24/7, but too tired to think clearly." She laid out her plan. Reasonable working hours, actual vacation time with no guilt trips, walking meetings instead of sitting in conference rooms all day, regular check-ins about workload and stress levels. "But most importantly," Rebecca said, "I need you all to hold me accountable. If you see me falling back into old patterns, call me out. Because the culture of this company starts with me, and I'm changing how I lead." The meeting ended with cautious optimism. Rebecca could tell they weren't entirely convinced. But that was okay. She'd show them through actions, not just words. Her first walking meeting was that afternoon with her head of product development. They walked around a nearby park, discussing the upcoming launch. Rebecca noticed details she'd never seen before, despite walking through this park dozens of times. A fountain with interesting sculptures, trees that were starting to change color, people sitting on benches just enjoying the day. "You know," her colleague said, "I was scared you were going to shut down my team's project. We're 6 months behind schedule." "Why are you behind?" Rebecca asked, genuinely curious rather than accusatory. "We kept having to stop and rebuild because we were rushing and making mistakes. Then we'd panic about the timeline and rush more. It became a cycle." Rebecca thought about the hike, about how trying to go too fast just made her more tired and less effective. "What if we extended the timeline? Gave you the time to do it right the first time?" Her colleague stopped walking. "Are you serious? The board will never approve that. Let me handle the board. You focus on building something great instead of something fast." Over the next few weeks, Rebecca made more changes. She started leaving the office by 6, no matter what. She took Sundays completely off. Phone turned off, no exceptions. She even joined a hiking group that met every Saturday morning. The first hike with the group was just 3 miles. But Rebecca finished it easier than that brutal 7-mile trek with Tom. She was getting stronger. Her body was adjusting just like he'd said it would, but the biggest changes were internal. Rebecca found herself actually listening in meetings instead of thinking about the next meeting. She noticed when team members seemed stressed and checked in with them. She made decisions based on what was sustainable, not just what was fastest. The board meeting was tense. Rebecca presented her new policies and waited for the pushback. "Our growth rate is going to slow," one investor said flatly. "In the short term, possibly," Rebecca agreed. "But our retention rate is already improving. Our error rate is dropping, and our employee satisfaction scores have gone up 15% in just a month. That translates to better products, happier customers, and sustainable growth." "Your competitors aren't taking breaks," another board member pointed out. "No, they're burning through talent and making panicked decisions. We're playing a long game, building something that lasts instead of something that flames out in 3 years." She thought about what Tom had said about forests, about how different trees grow at different rates and that diversity made the forest stronger, about how the fastest-growing trees weren't always the ones that lasted. The board approved her changes, though not everyone was happy about it. Rebecca didn't care. She wasn't trying to make everyone happy. She was trying to build something real. 3 months later, Rebecca hired a chief operating officer. Her name was Patricia, and she'd been running operations for a successful company that had grown steadily for 20 years without any of the boom and bust cycles that plagued their industry. "I have to warn you," Patricia said during her interview. "I'm not interested in working 80-hour weeks. I have a family. I have a life outside work. If that's a problem, I'm not the right person." "That's exactly why you're the right person," Rebecca told her. With Patricia handling daily operations, Rebecca had time to think strategically. She started mentoring young entrepreneurs, sharing not just business advice but life advice, warning them about the trap she'd fallen into, teaching them that success without sustainability wasn't really success at all. She spoke at conferences, not about hockey stick growth and disruption, but about building businesses that enhanced life instead of consuming it. Some people thought she'd gone soft. Others called her ideas naive, but the company kept growing, not explosively but steadily. And more importantly, people wanted to work there. Top talent started leaving burnout cultures to join a company that treated employees like humans. Rebecca's apartment changed too. She actually used that fancy kitchen, learning to cook simple meals. She bought some plants for the windows. She started reading books again, fiction that had nothing to do with business. She called Tom every week and they talked about more than just work. She told him about the hikes she was doing, the changes she was making. He told her about the park, the seasons changing, the rhythm of life that had nothing to do with quarterly earnings. "I'm proud of you," Tom said one evening. "I know it wasn't easy. It was the hardest thing I've ever done," Rebecca admitted. "Changing how I work felt harder than building the company in the first place. That's because you were fighting against years of conditioning. Everyone telling you that more is better, faster is better, always pushing is better. But it's not," Rebecca said, looking out her window at the sunset she'd actually stopped to watch. "I was so busy building an empire that I forgot to build a life."